Welcome to our special broadcast of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Prime Minister Narendra Modi's one-day visit to Gujarat. And it's going to be an interesting morning right now. Prime Minister Modi will welcome the Israeli Prime Minister in Ahmedabad. In a short while from now, the two ministers will hold a roadshow on the 8-kilometer stretch from the airport to Sabarmati Ashram. What you're, of course, seeing at the moment are visuals which came about 30 minutes ago when, of course, the Prime Minister himself landed at Ahmedabad. And in a short while from now, the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, will also be landing in Ahmedabad at the Sardar Patel International Airport. And from there, both the Prime Ministers will then head to Sabarmati Ashram, where, of course, on the way, they would hold a road show. And that is going to be quite a spectacle. And we'll be tracking, of course, all those developments through the next hour or so. And, of course, that is where both the Prime Ministers would pay homage to Mahatma Gandhi at Sabarmati Ashram. We'll be tracking all those developments, also talking to you about the importance and the significance of this visit, the significance of this roadshow, and the bonhomie between both the Prime Ministers that we've been seeing not just in this particular visit, but last year as well, when Prime Minister Modi visited Israel. We've got Akhilesh Suman from our own assistant editor here with us in studio, and he's of course been tracking all the developments, and he joins us here in studio. Akhilesh, it's going to be quite an interesting morning. It's something that Ahmedabad has been waiting for quite some time now and preparing itself for. Right. And you know, it's going to be quite a spectacle when both the Prime Ministers go on that roadshow. Yeah, actually the way Prime Minister is using diplomacy for creating a bonhomie between the two countries. It is not only the friendship between him and the other head of a state. He is also trying to project the whole thing as a bonhomie between the people of the two countries. Yes. And you know that now Israel have also created a situation in India. Then everyone is appreciating Israel. Small country in the desert area, actually. Yes, yes. Small country, and a small country has proved that by the willpower and by endeavor you can grow. And Israel has proved economically, Israel has proved militarily, and also Israel has sustained amongst all odds. I mean, politically also you see that every time Israel feels certain sort of isolation and alienation in the world community, but still Israel has been finding friends, has been finding allies, and it is surviving. So with this type of country, people of India is feeling somehow associated, because see, we have been facing the sort of terrorism that after all we had been trying a lot, so that diversity is our moral mantra of country, and we have been trying to accommodate every type of people in our country. And Benjamin Netanyahu, when he was here, and yesterday also he was speaking to a select gathering. It's rather a huge gathering of 90 world leaders and experts in Taj Hotel. It was Raisina Dialogue, and he mentioned very emphatically that India is the only country and one of the few countries where Jews were never persecuted. So you can understand that what India inheritance is, and Israel understands it. And this is the way that Prime Minister is trying to show Israel that India is still the same. And respects you, and India also gives importance to the Israeli people's endeavor. And I think that in Gujarat, when you go, Gujarat is a state of India which is known for enterprise. You go to any home and you will find some enterprising people, and Benjamin Netanyahu is going there. So I think that it's a good show for Netanyahu also. He will have a feel of India, that how India is, because this is his first visit to India also as a head of a state. So he will also get a feel after going from Delhi. He will be in Gujarat today, and then he will go to Mumbai. So he can have a trajectory from political capital to an enterprising state, and then to financial capital of the country. I think that's a absolutely, and this is a good tool or a way of actually opening up to world leaders, because not only Israeli Prime Minister that we'll be seeing now, even with Shinzo Abe, and that is a relationship India and Japan which people are looking at very closely. They're really trying to branch out, they're really trying to reach out to each other on different forums as well. And you know, last year in September too, we saw a similar kind of a roadshow that took place, and that was very successful. And that's a good way to show them that it's not just, you know, government-wise, you know, on a diplomatic level, we're opening up to you, but even on a people-to-people contact way, even on that forum, we're opening up to you as
yesterday,
well.
Benjamin Netanyahu mentioned it, that when he went to Agra with his wife, someone told him in Agra that yes, you are a friend of my Prime Minister, so I am a friend of yours, and you are a friend of India. So Prime Minister always try to create a situation when there is not just a scope of formal diplomacy. He goes into informal diplomacy, creating friendship, bonhomie with the leader who is coming here, so that he can feel at ease.
Yes.
And if you do that like this, then diplomacy also becomes a bit easier to handle.
Absolutely. Let's in fact also introduce another guest that we have in studio this morning. We've got Professor Harsh V. Pant, Distinguished Fellow and Head of ORF Strategic Studies with us. Harsh, thanks so much for being here. Like we were talking about, it's an interesting morning that we'll be seeing. Ahmedabad's been waiting, of course, to welcome, Prime Minister Netanyahu. Give us a sense of how significant this kind of a roadshow is and this kind of the relationship between the two countries that we are seeing.
See, in the case of India-Israel relationship that had been behind the curtains for so long, I think this is a very symbolic moment. Mr. Modi's visit took the relationship out of the closet, but I think this is a normalization of a relationship with a friend that was asking for acknowledgement for a long time, and India was reluctant to give it.
That's right.
So I think this is almost an embrace, an open embrace of a friend who has been with India on a number of issues, on almost all critical issues, and who had come to India's aid at every critical juncture. So I think this is an acknowledgement that that India believes in a strong friendship with Israel, and I think taking the relationship beyond just one parameter that used to be the case, that defense was the sole fulcrum of the relationship. I think we have now moved to a position where we are saying, look, this is a very broad-based relationship at multiple levels. You can see it from the prime ministerial level, personal engagement with each other, to a more people-to-people level, where I think Mr. Netanyahu wants to take this relationship to make it long-lasting and more sustainable. And I think this roadshow and this engagement in Gujarat reminds us that this is a relationship that is now fully being embraced by both sides and coming out in ways that we had not expected and we would not have expected just a few years back.
Absolutely. And let's just tell our viewers that we're of course waiting for the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to in fact land in Ahmedabad, where of course he will take part in that roadshow with Prime Minister Narendra Modi. They will travel from the airport to, of course, Sabarmati Ashram. But apart from that roadshow in Ahmedabad, the big event there will be the two leaders inaugurating the newly built I Create Center at Diodhulera village and also dedicating it to the nation. Formally launched in 2011 by Narendra Modi when he was the Gujarat Chief Minister, I Create was actually set up to nurture entrepreneurs by providing them with funds, space, mentors and also other facilities. The two Prime Ministers will also recognize and award 38 entrepreneurial projects from both the countries and interact with innovators and startup CEOs. And this is in fact a section that the Prime Minister, as far as Narendra Modi is concerned, is also very, very focused upon. And it's good to see that Israel too is going to be focusing on that as well. On Tuesday, remember, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu hailed Prime Minister Modi's efforts in improving the ease of doing business in the country, also saying that he believed in India and its potential. Inaugurating the third edition of the geopolitical conference, Rise in a Dialogue in the national capital, Benjamin Netanyahu stressed upon the need for greater cooperation between the two nations. He further added that the main job of both India and Israel is to cut bureaucratic delays. On Indo-Israel ties, Netanyahu said that the alliance of democracies is important to secure a common future and that the possibilities are endless. Prime Minister Narendra Modi had also attended the event. This dialogue, of course, Harsh, in collaboration with the ORF, give us a sense of, how crucial this is, the Rise in our Dialogue, the fact that, we've got a big delegation coming in, and of course, the attendance of such leaders there, and shed light on what exactly was the message that came out from both the Prime Ministers.
I think, the Rise in our Dialogue is an attempt to put India's on the global platform, how India can shape the discourse as India decides to take its place as a leading global player. So it's not simply a player in the context of any other emerging power, but we want to shape outcomes. So if you want to shape outcomes, you need to be out there in terms of the discourse.
Yes.
And I think this is an engagement which has been growing. This is the third edition, and you can see the scale and scope has been increasing. Last year, Mr. Modi, the Prime Minister of India, inaugurated this, and this year we have had a foreign leader, head of the state, coming coming and inaugurating this. So I think it shows an interest in India as far as the rest of the world is concerned, and it also shows that India is perfectly capable of articulating its own place in the world. So when you have a Prime Minister like Netanyahu come to India and give the inaugural speech, where I think he positions Indo-Israeli relationship in the larger context of what is happening in the world, and also the complementarities that exist between the two countries at multiple levels: economic, political, strategic, as well as cultural, where he talked of the values and how you have to be rooted to your culture if you want to expand both innovation as well as your sense of your place in the world. So I think very important articulation from him, and I think a very robust defense of India-Israel partnership. And I think the platform that India gave, that I think Mr. Modi decided not to speak to, just to accompany him, is a very important symbol of the relationship and of the importance that he places on Mr. Netanyahu's visit, that he wanted Mr. Netanyahu to take the center stage, to articulate his vision of Indo-Israeli relationship and not to take away anything from him. So I think that's in all, it has been a very successful articulation of the relationship for the last 3 days, and I think today what we are going to witness is another dimension where you reach out to another level at the state level, and of course innovation being the key.
Absolutely. And you know, one of the relationships, we talked about how, of course, the trade as far as the relationship was concerned to quite a large extent was, of course, with defense and technology to a certain extent. But, you know, with Israel, when we talk about the ties and we talk about the commonalities, one of that, of course, has been terrorism. We know terrorism is a topic that India, of course, stresses on very, very keenly or very strongly with each and every country. But with a country like Israel, who also agrees that radical Islam is something that, needs to be dealt with. We need to recognize a terrorist as he or she is and, deal with it in the same way. And that kind of a message that comes forward is also encouraging for India, because we understand through sources that intelligence sharing, of course, has happened. In fact, Prime Minister Netanyahu himself has said we've in fact thwarted a lot of terror attacks in the few years, which we've not revealed, but that it has been working, and that is a mechanism that has also begun, and it helps India, of course.
I think intelligence sharing with Israel has been a very significant part of this relationship. We have had defense relationship and intelligence sharing, which has been going on for quite some time, and Israel has been a very important source of some very critical intelligence that India has been getting. So in that sense, the relationship is long-lasting in many ways. But I think the issue was, can you articulate the need for India-Israel partnership in the open? And I think political parties, political discourse in this country tended to be that no, it's very difficult, it will put our relationships with other countries in jeopardy. So I think that element has been given away, and a robust articulation on its own merit has been made. So that makes all the difference now in terms, because it generates confidence. So now if you have societal confidence between the two countries, that means that you can further cooperate on intelligence. And I think on extremism, Islamic radicalism, India's voice has been very strong over the last few years. And I think if you look at the analysis that is coming out from the rest of the world, whether it's Europe, America, even China for that matter, at the BRICS summit last year, the sense that, look, earlier India was an outlier. India was saying things in the wilderness, no one was listening to it. Today, India's position is the mainstream position. So that makes it critical, I think, for us to then reach out to partners like Israel, which have had a traditional understanding of terrorism from their own context, and which have been battling this for quite some time with a degree of success. And therefore, there are certain things that we can perhaps emulate. We can engage with each other in terms of our assessment of the problem, as well as how do you operationalize certain ways of dealing with terror and radicalism. And I think it will be a very useful conversation, and if this conversation can be held openly, then I think all the more useful it will be.
Absolutely, and the more open we get, the conversation, of course, also has to go back to how the past was, Akhilesh. There was a sort of, wariness, there was a sort of, like was being pointed out, everything was behind closed doors, nothing was really in the open as far as India-Israel relations were concerned, also because of the Arab world, the kind of apprehensions that perhaps, India had in trying to be open with that. Also the Palestine issue, that is also a big issue as far as Israel is concerned. But it shows a level of maturity when you have Benjamin Netanyahu coming here and saying just a few weeks after that UN vote, saying that a vote takes place. We are, of course, disappointed with it, but we understand that India as a nation has a certain stand, and we cannot change that. But just on the basis of that vote, we cannot, sideline the other good things that are, of course, happening. And it shows a level of maturity on the part of both the countries.
Right, you are right. But it's not that India just have a stand that is mired in the history. You know that India is putting itself in the forefront of United Nations Security Council reform. And for United Nations security reform, you need a host of countries to help you. Yes. And you have seen that, like Yoga Day, like International Court of Justice, we have got phenomenal support in the UN system. And if you go with Israel just for shifting the capital from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, it will neither going to help Israel nor going to help us, because we have a bigger goal. And if Israel is our friend, like Benjamin Netanyahu was mentioning again and again, Narendra, he was using the first name Narendra, he also used the first name Modi. I think Prime Minister Narendra Modi was also elated at this type of bonhomie and friendship that is coming from another head of a state. And he appreciates it, and he mentioned these words also, that it is not a one issue relationship, India and Israel, because you have a larger goal, and one of the larger goals that we have supplementarity of needs. Like Israel is a very developed technology, and we are one of the biggest markets in the world. We have skilled, enterprising people that can take help from Israel, and it will be beneficial to both of us. So Israel cannot also put itself in the case of Tel Aviv and Jerusalem issue. So he came here with an open heart, first time in the history after Ariel Sharon came here. And Benjamin Netanyahu, it was the first time, and Prime Minister Narendra Modi is really showing in what India is all about. So I think that is why he is taking him to 3-4 places today. And what we were seeing was also there, that Netanyahu mentioned it very clearly, that we need a conglomerate or alliance of democracy to fight this type of radicalization. So it is like something understood everywhere, understands that the radicalization is a problem. And Prime Minister Narendra Modi has been pitching in the world for a long time. Even if he goes to Malaysia, with Malaysian head of state also, he discussed this issue, and it was one of the major issues in ASEAN last time when Prime Minister Narendra Modi went. So it is one of the important issues that every country wants to face, and that is why Benjamin Netanyahu also mentioned, and we are on board on this issue.
Absolutely. We'll continue discussing, of course, and also track the developments that are taking place there in Ahmedabad. We're waiting to, of course, see that welcome that we'll be seeing of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu by Prime Minister Modi at the Sardar Patel International Airport. But before that, let's also give you an idea of what has been happening the past few days. Of course, on Sunday is when Netanyahu landed in India, and on Monday, Prime Minister Modi and the visiting Israeli Prime Minister signed 9 agreements in various fields, including defense technology, during the delegation level talks. Of course, they were an MOU on cyber security cooperation that we saw, an MOU on cooperation in oil and gas sector, a protocol on amendments to air transport agreement, then an agreement on film co-production, an MOU on homeopathic medicine, MOU in the field of space, MOU between Invest India and Invest in Israel, a letter of intent on metal air batteries, letter of intent on solar thermal technology. Of course, the Israeli Prime Minister praised Prime Minister Modi, calling him a revolutionary leader. And Prime Minister Modi responded by calling the relationship with Israel the relationship of the century. Condemning the menace of terrorism, Netanyahu also said that Israel will always stand by India on the issue. Talking about these particular agreements that were, of course, signed, give us an idea, Harsh, of what are the other platforms in which we'll be seeing more of an India-Israel cooperation. You, of course, have defense. That is the main, chunk of course, the trade that we'll be seeing. But India, of course, also looking at agriculture, irrigation. That's one of the very important sectors that India is going to be focusing on, considering how even domestically that is also one of the focus of the Narendra Modi government.
I think one of the ways in which this seems to have been framed, what the priorities are going to be, is that if you think about innovation, then you cut across various sectors. So if you look at what Israel has done with its innovation ecosystem, there is much to learn from that. There is much to emulate, because ultimately gone are the days where the state can provide employment. to the masses. And I think ultimately, unless your society becomes innovative, unless you start investing in future technologies, unless you are making or at least have the ambition of making individuals entrepreneurs,
yes,
the employment crisis that is coming with the demographic dividend is not going to, is going to be very severe. So I think what is now is happening is that we are looking at this engagement from a very pragmatic point of view. That look, there are values which Mr. Netanyahu talked about. There is terrorism, there is defense, but ultimately what we are going to look at across sectors. And I think the list of MOUs that you mentioned, they cut across various sectors. And there the idea is that how do you generate employment? How do you enhance productivity? So when you talk of agriculture, we have an agricultural crisis in the making.
Yes.
Partly because agricultural reforms have been missing for the last so many decades.
That's right.
And because we have missed the bus over the last few decades, we are now facing a situation where we don't know, what the future steps may be. And there I think the sort of issues, if you link it with innovation, and if you link it with big data, for example, this idea that we use big data, generate a lot of big data, then you can map out individual farmers, what their requirements are. I think this is a remarkable thing if this can be accomplished, and Israel is best placed to help us with that, because we don't, I think there is no other country in the world that is as productive in as difficult circumstances as Israel has been in the agricultural field. If you look at this is a desert, arid areas, and they have been enormously productive.
Yes.
They have been able to make something out of nothing. And here we have all the resources. So I think it's only a decision to commit. I think certain trends, certain
and to know the next step forward, to know where to actually put your money in, and that is important.
And I think so innovation, I think, is going to be the framework around which we will see this relationship evolving.
Yes, and as far as Israel is concerned, what is it that Israel is also hoping to get from India? There's of course space and technology. That is, our space area. That is something that they've always been interested in. Do we see more of a collaboration on that front?
We do have expertise in space, there is no doubt about it, and we have launched so many satellites, that in the last 2 years we have shown the world that we can launch satellites at the trigger of the finger. So it was like that, and Israel is really interested in using our space technology expertise, because Israel is a tiny country, and till now they have managed with technology their country. But once you go in a bigger game, so like after coming of Mr. Trump, Israel got a thumbs down that yes, Mr. Trump is already there with Israel for whatever. It was the manifesto of the party, and whatever, he is fulfilling everything that he has committed to the Jews in his own country, and now Israel is also. So there is a bit elevated ambition in Israel also. And given the fact that you are aligning with the largest democracy of the world, and a democracy which is fighting for its rightful place in the world, so your allies also get a bit ambitious, and that is why they are going into space. But I think that one of the major issues that Israel wants from India, that unconditional support on the issue of terrorism, and support on issue of resolving the issue of Palestine and Israel in a way that will be conducive and that will be respecting to both the aspirations. So I have been hearing that both Israelis and Palestinians wanted India to use our resources to find a solution in this way, not in a formal way like Americans are doing, but informally they want to use our resources with the Palestinian, also Palestinian wants to use our resources with the Israelis, so that we can have a certain situation that this issue is resolved.
Absolutely. And let me just tell our viewers, these are visuals that you're of course seeing live from Ahmedabad, and we believe this is of course Prime Minister Netanyahu landing there at Ahmedabad. In a short while from now we'll be seeing him being welcomed by Prime Minister Modi in a short while, after which of course they will go on that road show till Sabarmati Ashram, and it's something that Ahmedabad and in fact the rest of India has been looking forward to, as far as this particular visit is concerned, and also as far as this particular roadshow is concerned. We saw a very successful roadshow that took place last year as well in September with the Japanese Premier Shinzo Abe as well, and of course now we'll be seeing it with Netanyahu, and we're waiting of course to see him disembark from the plane. But while we're of course looking at these visuals, Harsh, we come back to really the importance of a roadshow, of not just a Prime Minister of the country taking out a roadshow, but also with another Prime Minister, and that in itself is significant. It's something that doesn't occur very often in other countries as well. And give us an idea of the significance of a roadshow of this manner? When you introduce a different leader of a state, to the people of that particular area?
I think it's symbolically very, very important, because what Mr. Modi seems to be doing with a number of leaders now, especially with whom he regards as close friends, is to make an acknowledgement that, look, these are very important countries, and for India these are very important countries, and they're not only important in the strategic sense, in the sense that at times technical experts talk, but in terms of what they mean in personal terms to India. So I think both Mr. Abe and Mr. Netanyahu have been personal friends of India in the sense that their ideology, their commitment to strong India, Israel in Mr. Netanyahu's case, India, Japan in Mr. Abe's case, that has been very significant. So I think that when you invest personally in a relationship, I think it becomes important for India also to demonstrate that, look, we value that commitment. And I think when he introduces people like Mr. Netanyahu and Mr. Abe to general audience in India, I mean, because this is not simply about Gujarat, but this is also introducing common man and woman in India to world leaders. I think he's also normalizing this idea that, look, these are important countries, these are significant countries in their own right, but they are also reflective of the larger reality that India is facing with regard to their relations. They are improving, and they are at a level where you can almost take them for a drive around the town almost. Yes. So it almost becomes personal, it becomes societal, it becomes national in one go. So I think that's a very interesting way of articulating, I think, his desire for closer contacts between the two nations, and I think this is also something that Mr. Modi's style is also like that. So he's also
I was coming to that, in fact, that this is also his way of just the way he conducts himself, just the way, in fact, his speeches are. It's a very open, it's a very sincere kind of a relationship that he has with his followers, he has with his party workers, he has with his fans. But that is something that he's trying to open up with the other leaders as well.
I think this is very interesting, because he tends to be, if you for example, his social media outreach, or whether if you see his speeches, even during the campaigns, for example, he is very local in the texture. He will refer to local, wherever he would go, he would refer to local problems, local ideas, local institutions. And I think that is something that he is now introducing in the foreign policy lexicon of India, which has never been done before. We have had visits of foreign leaders going to, for example, Mumbai or elsewhere, but very elite-oriented interactions.
Absolutely.
Here, taking that to a different level, to engaging foreign leadership with India's grassroots, which I think also makes them aware of Indian requirements. So it's a two-way assessment. For them, it's a real-time assessment of what is happening in India. For us, it's an understanding that, look, these are very important commitments that these individuals have made towards India. So let us give them that acknowledgement. So I think it works both ways.
And I think, Trace, you might remember that Indian film, you have Bombay se aaya mera dost ko salam karo. So though it is in Indian parlance, but Prime Minister Narendra Modi has innovated in diplomacy that, see, head of states and heads of governments are really isolated people. They are surrounded with so many guards and so many protocol things that wherever they go, they hardly see their reality. They go in the very protected situation, they do the meeting and they come out of it. But they also need to understand that what this soil is all about. And Prime Minister Narendra Modi, I think he understood this thing, because he also rose up from a very low level of politics, and then he rose up to this highest level. So he understands that what a leader needs, and that is why Prime Minister, whenever he goes somewhere, you will see him going in a museum, he will go him seeing some paintings. So he also wants to understand, and I think that he understands the need of other states, head of states also. And that is why this road, so in a way, you can get everything on the Google. You can see in the movies. But when you see something right in front of your eyes, you will get a different feel.
Absolutely. And where else would you get this kind of a welcome? Where you have the dancers of the region welcoming you in this manner. So even for the visiting heads of state, it would be interesting for them as
that is how he will understand India, that India is what India is all about. And whatever you want to show him, it will give him a feel that yes, India has developed to this state, and this will create some sort of level playing field between us, and this naturally it goes to the heart. When you welcome a friend, you take him to your home, you serve him food that you like and he may also like, and you surround him with the people of your culture. So he enjoys, and when he goes back, he will have this sweet memory in his heart, and if he is deciding something about India, rationally it will be there in his mind that India is this type of country which has welcomed me in a way that I was never welcomed. And I was interacting with African head of states many times and diplomats. They always mention that the way India welcomes us, nobody welcomes us. So because some of the African states are very small, but when they come to India, we give proper protocol, we give proper all welcome, guard of honor, everything. So they feel very overwhelmed. So in a way that whichever head of a state comes, if you give him full scale India before him, he will be elated and he will go back with a very good heart from experience from India. And I think Prime Minister has understood this miracle in diplomacy.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's a good way, of course, to work your way through, and what a way through the heart, isn't it, Harsh? And especially this particular visit, we're seeing a lot of heart, we're seeing a lot of warmth, a lot of friendship between both the sides, and it seems genuine. It doesn't seem forced. It doesn't seem, you know, the handshakes are not forced, as we've seen in certain kind of leaders, of course, across the world. The hugs are not forced, but, you know, the warmth is genuine, it looks like. And that is what makes it even more special, this particular trip.
Yes, I think it's also a reflection of what happened to Mr. Modi when he went. I think he was given to Israel. He was given a very warm welcome.
Absolutely, yes.
So I think there is also a sense that you need to reciprocate that warmth in some ways. And I think Mr. Modi's style is such that he goes all out. So I think in this case also he wants to give a sense that, look, I appreciate what you did to me. And I think this is one of the interesting things with the Raisina dialogue, because he could have chosen not to accompany Mr. Netanyahu to the dialogue. After all, he was just sitting there in the audience. But I think it's just a gesture, and that means that I'm sitting in the audience, you are the star attraction, and I'm a listener. And I think that that sense that he was able to convey is very important. I think because partly it also happened to him, because when he went, Mr. Netanyahu accompanied him everywhere. So I think that reciprocity in a relationship is very important. I think we are demanding reciprocity in our foreign relations now, and so I think this is something that is his style, and this is also part of how Indian foreign policy is becoming more pragmatic.
I can say that it's an innovation of Prime Minister in diplomacy, because this type of you can ridicule. Some people joke it out, hug diplomacy. Some people joke it out like what is the meaning of this road show. But diplomacy is not about what is written in the book. Diplomacy is that how you interact with the world, how you interact with the diplomats, and how you can get their mind and heart in your favor. This is all about diplomacy. And Prime Minister, you can say that utilizing this mindset of diplomacy in a way that he is being successful. Like he said Barack. Okay, there was some sort of joke in our country also, but it minimized the whole hostility between India and USA at that point of time. And Barack Obama couldn't deny he came again to India. He came twice to India, and again he came from his Obama Foundation. So this type of things work even when it is a new. So this is an innovation. I will tell that this is an innovation in diplomacy in this point of time, when India is trying to reach out to the world for various reasons, for terrorism, for Security Council reform, for reform in the World Bank, IMF, ICJ. We have seen everywhere we are getting successful because of this outreach of diplomacy.
All right, we are still waiting, of course, to see Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to get out of the plane and then eventually go on that roadshow. They seem to be about 30 minutes late. But you know, that's how things are when it comes to such top engagements.
Diplomacy at this scale, yes, often.
No, but I think that there was a fog in Delhi also.
Oh,
in the
yeah,
morning.
that's right. Absolutely.
Fog के कारण हमको लगता है कि वो हवाई जहाज में थोड़ी delay हुई है.
Absolutely. Fog and rain as well.
Rain, yeah.
Absolutely. And perhaps that is why there was a delay. But nonetheless, it's a nice sunny day there in Ahmedabad, and it's going to be a good, successful road show. And as you can see, you've got, of course, all these artists who've been performing there, and we're ready to welcome the Israeli Prime Minister. Harsh, since we're talking, of course, of you know, the significance of this visit and all kinds of the kinds of interactions that we've seen, also the kinds of focus of areas that both countries are looking at. Do we see, as far as the shift in other areas apart from defense, and now we are going to be seeing that startup, the focus on startup today that we'll be seeing when they go to iCreate, these are new areas, and these are new areas that Prime Minister Modi, at least here in India, is focusing on. And he's really trying to work on it. And we've seen, a significant rise in, of course, these kind of companies in the past few years, since 2014. And with Israel as well, do we see something like that emerging? Is that something that they have been focusing on for a while? Do we gain something out of that?
Yes, I think Israel has the second largest number of startups after the US. So I think certainly when we are talking of our own startup program, we can learn a lot because their base is much narrower than ours.
Yes.
So if they can accomplish so much, then I think there are important lessons for us to learn in terms of policy implementation. The policy may be there, but how do you operationalize it on the ground? I think that's the question that we have to understand. And I think Prime Minister Modi very rightly thinks that Israel can be a partner in that regard. So I think, see, the whole logic of foreign policy has become very pragmatic. So we are looking for operational outcomes from these bilateral visits. So one aspect of the relationship which will always be there, which defense and security cooperation, intelligence, counterintelligence, counter-terror cooperation. But I think this new aspect which Mr. Modi has now brought frontally to the center of Indo-Israeli relations is something that will make this relationship longer lasting, that will make this relationship strategic in real sense of the word, because you have to look at to economies, to societies, to polities, because you have to you have to implement public policy integrated in a manner that we have not seen before. You can have conversations about defense with a very few people from both sides talking about it. You can have conversations about security, but when you are taking it to the level where you want to engage with their innovation ecosystem, with their startup ecosystem, I think ultimately you need broader interactions across societies, politics, larger stakeholders in the system. And I think that's exactly what they want to do. They want to broaden the base. They want to bring in more stakeholders, and I think they will be. I hope they will be successful, because even if you think of it in terms of people-to-people contact or culture, tourism, there's a lot of emphasis. I think that there's the engagement with the Bombay film industry, Mumbai film industry.
बिल्कुल हर्ष जो बोल रहे थे, मैं परसों जब प्रेस कॉन्फ्रेंस हो रहा था, संयुक्त प्रेस कॉन्फ्रेंस प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी और नेतन्याहू के बीच में, वहाँ एक इजरायली जर्नलिस्ट, वो महाभारत का ट्रांसलेशन हिब्रू में, ही वाज आई टुक अ पिक्चर आल्सो इन माय मोबाइल, तो हिब्रू में वो महाभारत का ट्रांसलेशन, मैंने पूछा कि है क्या, तो उन्होंने बताया महाभारत है, फिर पेज इंग्लिश में जो लिखा हुआ था महाभारत उन्होंने दिखाया, एंड ही स्टार्टेड टेलिंग मी द स्टोरी ऑफ कुंती एंड ऑल. सो वो लोग भी काफ़ी इंटरेस्टेड हैं हमारे भारत के बारे में, कि कैसे, और ये जो स्वस्तिक का निशान आप देखते हैं इजराइल के झंडे पे, वो बार बार मेंशन करते हैं. आपने देखा होगा हमारे यहाँ भी स्वस्तिक एक बहुत ही ऑस्पिशियस सिंबल माना जाता है हिंदू रिलीजन में, और स्वस्तिक उनके झंडे पे लगा हुआ है. तो इस एक तरीके की समानता है दोनों. बार बार कोशिश कर रहे थे कि वो बताएं कि कैसे इजराइल और भारत के लोग एक तरीके से रामायण का वहाँ बड़ा प्रचलन, बहुत लोग जानकारी रखते हैं, महाभारत के बारे में जानकारी रखते हैं, हमारे बॉलीवुड के बारे में एक बताना शुरू कर दिए. सलमान खान, शाहरुख खान, अमिताभ बच्चन और ऐश्वर्या राय वो बताना शुरू कर दिए. सो एक बॉलीवुड के माध्यम से, और जो देखा आपने कि को प्रोडक्शन के बारे में हुआ है कि एक समझौता कि भारत और इजराइल मिलकर को प्रोडक्शन करेंगे. तो जो हर्ष बोल रहे थे कि अगर स्टार्टअप और इनोवेशन करना है तो दोनों के दिमाग को समझना जरूरी है, और क्योंकि ये क्रिएटिव फील्ड है, और अगर क्रिएटिव फील्ड में हम लोग अमेरिका को तो समझने लगे हैं, इंग्लिश लैंग्वेज के कारण अमेरिका, इंग्लैंड हम लोग अच्छी तरह समझते हैं, लेकिन इजराइल जो कि बहुत एलियन नहीं था हमारे लिए, लेकिन एक बहुत ही राजनीतिक कारणों से, और जैसा कि बोला नेतन्याहू ने कि 3000 साल में पहली बार नरेंद्र मोदी हेड ऑफ स्टेट के रूप में इजराइल गए थे, सो दे आर ऑल्सो वेरी हैप्पी अबाउट इट. लेकिन जो एक उत्सुकता मैं देखता हूँ, और हर्ष में बताऊँ, पिछले साल इजराइल की एम्बेसी ने एक पार्टी दिल्ली में दी थी, और उसमें मैं जब देखा तो मैं अवाक रह गया, इतने लोग, मतलब वन ऑफ द बिगेस्ट हॉल इन दिल्ली, और उसमें तरह तरह के क्षेत्रों के लोग उसमें शामिल हैं और बहुत तरह के रिजर्वेशंस बहुत लोगों के हैं, लेकिन सारे उन एम्बेसी के जो लोग नहीं चाहते इजराइल के साथ बहुत दोस्ती दिखाना, बहुत सारे ऐसे पॉलिटिकल ग्रुप के लोग। सो उन्होंने भी अपना रीच बढ़ाया है इंडिया में। और भारत के बारे में आप देखेंगे कि भारत में उनके बारे में प्रशंसा का जो स्वर बढ़ा है, काफ़ी बढ़ा है, क्योंकि हम लोग हमेशा एक्सीलेंस, भले हम एक्सीलेंट नहीं हों लेकिन एक्सीलेंस की हम पूजा करते हैं। इसलिए हमारे बहुत देवी देवताओं में एक्सीलेंस दिखता है। तो कोई विश्वकर्मा है तो वो एक्सीलेंट एक देवता है जो टेक्नोलॉजी के बारे में जानता है। वी हैव क्रिएटेड सच सिंबल्स इन आवर ओन रिलीजन एंड कंट्री आल्सो। सो हमें एक अप्रिशिएट करने की भावना है एक्सीलेंस के बारे में। एंड उसीलिए मैं देखता हूँ कि इजराइल के बारे में जनता के विभिन्न खेमों में एक अप्रिसिएशन बहुत बड़ा है कि कैसे बढ़ गया वो देश, इतना आगे बढ़ गया, छोटा सा देश है, कैसे आगे बढ़ गया। फिलिस्तीन के बारे में सहानुभूति होने के बाद भी एक लगता है हमारे मन में, लोगों के मन में लगता है कि आगे क्यों नहीं बढ़ रहा है, हमेशा एक ही उसमें ट्रायंगल में क्यों फंसा हुआ है, नहीं आगे बढ़ता है। तो ये एक ऐसी भावना है भारत और इजराइल के बारे में, और भारत में अप्रिसिएशन बढ़ा है। तो मुझे लगता है कि इनोवेशन में भारत को मदद मिलेगी, भारत के लोगों को इससे।
Absolutely, and while we are talking, of course, the visuals are here, the live visuals, of course, that Prime Minister Narendra Modi there walking to receive the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for the roadshow, and where they will eventually reach Sabarmati Ashram in a short while from now. This is in fact the second welcome that he's getting. The first one, of course, was when he did arrive in India.
Yes.
And that in itself was a break of protocol. And that was recognized by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He, in fact, was surprised, he said, when he saw, Prime Minister Modi himself walking to receive him.
Yes.
And now this is the second one that he's getting within a period of just 4 days.
वो जो कहते हैं ना ट्रेसी की, बड़े आदमी के साथ आप रहेंगे तो बड़ा आदमी आपको बड़ा फील कराता है। When we are with big man, तो he will make you feel big yourself. तो प्राइम मिनिस्टर जितना भी समय किसी के साथ रहे, कहते हैं उनके आसपास के जो लोग कहते हैं होते हैं, वो बताते हैं कि प्राइम मिनिस्टर अगर आपके साथ 2 मिनट हैं तो आपको इतना बड़ा फील करा देंगे कि आप उसके बाद महसूस हैं कि यस प्राइम मिनिस्टर। तो वैसा ही प्रयोग वे हर समय करते हैं। और जब खुद वो लेने जा रहे हैं बेंजामिन नेतन्याहू को, प्रोटोकॉल की कोई चिंता नहीं, कोई एम्बेसडर जाएगा, फॉरेन सेक्रेटरी जाएगा रिसीव करने के लिए, उसकी कोई चिंता नहीं। और एक दोस्त को रिसीव करने जा रहा है, इससे बड़ी चीज़ कोई दोस्त के लिए नहीं होती कि किसी थर्ड पर्सन से हाथ मिला के हम आपसे हाथ मिला रहे हैं या सीधे आपसे मिला रहे हैं। तो इट मेक्स लॉट्स ऑफ डिफरेंस एंड इट इज़ वर्किंग ऑन डिप्लोमेसी। इट इज़ अ लॉन्ग टर्म I think strategy in diplomacy, but it will work. I think the way India is reaching out to many countries in the world,
Absolutely.
I think it will work.
Absolutely, and there were quite a bit of apprehensions on how this visit, which was going to be last year when Prime Minister Modi went to Israel, on how the visit is going to be. What is the relationship going to be like? What are the statements that are going to come out of it? And it did surprise quite a lot of people. The bonhomie and the warmth that you saw between both the leaders. It was in the making. You had, of course, high-level delegations were talking. There was, it was in the making. So there was, of course, you were at the anvil of something big was going to happen. But when it did happen, it took quite a few critics by surprise, didn't it, Harsh?
Yes, I think the understanding, I think there was an argument, first of all, when Mr. Modi got elected, that the first thing he's going to do is going to visit Israel, and he's going to do this and that. So, and I think he took his time.
Yes.
He prepared for this diplomatic engagement, which means that we are not doing something just because, all right, we love Israelis, so let's first make
or we need to make a statement, so let's just go and do something the most wacky of them all.
Because foreign policy does not work like that. You have to think and operationalize certain idea of India's position in the Middle East. And I think so he very carefully calibrated, choreographed his Middle East outreach. He went to the UAE, Saudi Arabia, even Iran, and then he gradually shifted to Israel. And I think the message was very clear that look, you have multiple stakes in the region. Almost all these countries are very important, but if you are looking at this, you will realize that this is a relationship that exists at a different level. This is a camaraderie that exists at the personal level. There's a societal argument which Mr. Netanyahu made yesterday, that this is something that is in our values, in the way we live.
विजुअल्स को देखिए हर्ष और ट्रेसी, वो विजुअल्स जिस तरह से प्राइम मिनिस्टर नरेंद्र मोदी नेतन्याहू और उनकी पत्नी को बार बार कुछ कुछ बता रहे हैं। लगातार एक हेड ऑफ स्टेट को एंगेज रखना जरूर इसका मतलब है कि आप लगातार कुछ इन्फॉर्मेशन उसको दे रहे हैं, और हर इन्फॉर्मेशन आपके देश के बारे में, आपके समाज के बारे में, आपकी पूरी संस्कृति के बारे में उनको अवेयर रखता है। तो एक बहुत बड़ा काम है, जो कई बार कहते हैं कि गाइड रख लो आप, गाइड हमेशा आपको घुमाते रहेगा, बताते रहेगा, बट प्राइम मिनिस्टर से बड़ा गाइड कोई नहीं हो सकता। जो लगातार आप देखिए कि वो कुछ ना कुछ समझा रहे हैं, कुछ ना कुछ बता रहे हैं। So it's really something very appreciative of the Prime Minister also, that he can keep engaged head of a state like this, that he is telling every time some information about the country that he might not read and he might have missed on the pages of books or Googles.
Absolutely, and it's perhaps with an enormous sense of pride, because this is his home state as well. So all the more for him to introduce a head of state, with more information and more about the people of that particular state when it is your own home area. So I think all the more it is exciting and interesting, of course, to see how Prime Minister Modi is receiving the Israeli Prime Minister, and of course Sarah Netanyahu as well, the wife of Benjamin Netanyahu. We were talking about the friendship, and we were talking about the significance of this visit. If our viewers are just joining us, just give us a sense. We spoke about it in brief, of course, but the importance of when you have a road show, which they are going to embark upon in a short while from now, the symbolism in it of Prime Minister Modi bringing on a leader to a particular area to take them away, away from protocol, away from security engagements, away from how you earlier said, these elite engagements, and bring them to the grassroots people. Harsh, once again, if you could give us an idea of how important, a roadshow like this is.
Very important, and I think it also tells you that this is a relationship that has moved beyond boardrooms, beyond our standard state level interactions, to a level where I think the Prime Minister, who had as a Chief Minister also engaged Israel, and wants to showcase what has happened perhaps with Israeli help in his home state, and therefore making a broader argument that, look, this is something that we accomplished together at the state level, now we can do it at the national level. And I think this idea that we need to let democracy flow beyond just the elite interactions to a level where the head of the state is getting a very personalized assessment, a personalized
and
engagement.
seems to be a personal umbrella there as well.
हाँ, जो बोलते हैं कि फल मूल और कंद से हम अपने अतिथियों का स्वागत करते हैं। हमारे पास जो भी है, हमारे पास दिखाने के लिए जो भी है, हमारा घर छप्पड़ का है, हमारा घर खपड़े का है, कंक्रीट का बन गया है, लेकिन हम जो भी है हमारे पास, उससे अगर अपने अतिथि का स्वागत करते हैं तो अतिथि भी बहुत खुश होता है। हमसे वह एक्सपेक्ट नहीं करता कि आप दुनिया की सबसे अच्छी चीज़ हमें दिखाओ, दुनिया के सबसे अच्छा खाना खिलाओ, या दुनिया के सबसे अच्छे घर में हमको रखो, लेकिन वो सोचता है कि जो आपके पास है वो तो हम देखें कि आपका घर कैसा है, वो आपका गांव कैसा है, आपकी ज़मीन कैसी है। तो प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी की मुझे लगता है कोशिश यही रहती है कि जो वसुधैव कुटुंबकम का जो एक भाव होता है, तो उसका मतलब ये नहीं कि हमारे दो सरकारें हैं, बल्कि हम पूरे वसुधा के कुटुंब हैं, और पूरे वसुधा को हम अपना कुटुंब मानते हैं। इस लिहाज से हमारे पास जो है वो आप देखें, हमारे पास जो है वो आप खाएं, और हमारे पास जो जगह है उसमें रहें। तो यह जो भाव प्रधानमंत्री देते हैं और लगातार हेड ऑफ स्टेट्स को इंगेज रखते हैं, उनको सूचनाएं देने में, उनके संस्कृति के बारे में बताने में, मुझे लगता है कि यह एक काम करेगा लॉन्ग टर्म में भारत की डिप्लोमेसी के बारे में, जो कि एक कुछ अफसरों के फॉर्मल ब्रीफिंग या इंटरेक्शन से अलग हटकर उनको एक फील देता है।
These visuals will be broadcast in Israel, right? So this is going to have a much wider impact in terms of how you're projecting India in the Israeli mind, in the minds of ordinary Israelis. And we know that the younger generation of Israelis lot of them come to India. You have after they finish their military service. And that, I think, is something that Mr. Modi wants to tap into. That this is, this is our heritage, this is our culture, this is how India engages with outsiders, and you are welcome. So it's not simply about Mr. Netanyahu as a person, which is, of course, he's the head of the state, but it is also about sending a signal to the larger Israeli community.
Yes.
That look, you are also welcome. This is what we do. This is how we.
Yes. I mean, if we receive your Prime Minister in this manner, just imagine the way we'll receive you as well, and that is why that's what we were talking about. The open interaction with the people and this openness that we're seeing, the opening up of our hearts, is something that is very important as far as what is being projected by the Prime Minister himself on a personal level. And that is in fact going to get carried forward to not just Israel but other countries as well, who are of course watching it very closely. Just to tell our viewers, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu arrived with his wife Sarah a short while back at the Sardar Patel International Airport in Ahmedabad, and after a very quick interaction with, of course, the artists there, which was a good thought. I think they've been waiting there for a long time. They've been performing and waiting to welcome the Prime Ministers, and it was nice of them to go and interact with them as well. A very quick, brief chat with all of them, and now they've sat in this vehicle, and we'll soon be seeing them moving ahead on the roads of Ahmedabad, heading towards Sabarmati Ashram, where, of course, they will pay their homage there to Mahatma Gandhi. We are, of course, live throughout this period. You're watching here on Rajya Sabha TV a special broadcast of this roadshow that is to take place in a very short while from now, where both the Prime Ministers, our Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, would be taking this journey to Sabarmati Ashram.
तो ट्रेसी, आप देखिए कि इजराइल के बारे में जो आम तौर पर ये माना जाता है कि इजराइल बहुत ही बिजनेस लाइक पीपल हैं, बहुत ही फॉर्मल रहते हैं, उनको काम से काम मिलता है। लेकिन ऐसे में आप देखें, जिस समय प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी वहाँ गए इजराइल पहली बार भारत के इतिहास में, वहाँ उनको जो वार्मथ मिला, जो गर्माहट मिली पूरे संबंधों की, और लोगों ने उनको प्यार दिया, वैसे ही हम यहाँ भी दे रहे हैं। तो यह एक नेचुरल एक फ्रेंडशिप भी बना रहा है दोनों। अगर इजराइल की जनता देख रही है, उनको भी काफ़ी ये महसूस होता है कि हमको कुछ देशों ने इजराइल को एक आइडियोलॉजी बना दिया, एक कंट्री से एक आइडियोलॉजी बना दिया, और आइडियोलॉजी के आधार पे, एक जनसंख्या के आधार पे, खास धर्म के आधार पे अलग करने के प्रयास किए गए, और उनकी इस बात को नहीं देखा गया कि उसने कितना संघर्ष करके विश्व युद्ध के पूरे ताप से बाहर निकल के उन्होंने एक देश को बनाया, और उन्होंने अपने देश को स्थापित किया, अपने लोगों की चिंता की। एक इजरायली अगर मरता है वहाँ तो लगता है कि पूरे देश में शोक का माहौल है। उस तरह का एक समाज क्रिएट किया, और उसको जब लगेगा कि यहाँ भारत में हमारे यहाँ इतना स्वागत हो रहा है, हमारे शासनाध्यक्ष का इतना स्वागत हो रहा है, तो निश्चित तौर पे उनके दिमाग में, उनके मन में एक हमारे लिए जो आदर और प्रेम का भाव उत्पन्न होगा, वह एक लाख टके की, करोड़ टके की बात होती है। उसको आप पैसे से या तकनीक से नहीं खरीद सकते ट्रेसी। वह एक लॉन्ग टर्म एसेट हो जाता है जो भारत और इजराइल के बीच में काम करेगा, और प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी इसी तरह के एसेट्स क्रिएट करने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं। जब पिछले कई साल पहले मैं एक बात कर रहा था डिप्लोमेट से, तो उन्होंने बोला बड़े गर्व से कि देखिए, अब तो हेड ऑफ स्टेट्स को मिलने की कोई ज़रूरत नहीं रहती है। बेसिकली मैंने जो डिप्लोमेट से इतने फ्रिक्वेंटली मिलते रहते हैं, सारी चीज़ें बात तय होती रहती है, हर देशों की एम्बेसी हर जगह है, ट्रेड रिप्रेजेंटेटिव, सिक्योरिटी है, एवरीवन इज़ देयर। तो अब प्राइम मिनिस्टर और प्रेसिडेंट मिले या नहीं मिले, इट डजंट मैटर। लेकिन हुआ नहीं। वर्ल्ड आज इतना कॉम्प्लिकेटेड हो गया है कि हर कंट्री देखता है अपना हित, और उसके बाद उस किसी और के हित से कैसे हो रहा है, जो आइडियोलॉजिज्म था वो ख़त्म हो रहा है। हर देश प्रैग्मेटिकली अपने को दिखाने की कोशिश कर रहा है। वैसे में अब प्रधानमंत्रियों का आपस में मिलना काफ़ी ज़रूरी हो गया, क्योंकि अगर जिस तरीके से देशों की ज़रूरतें बढ़ रही हैं, वैसे में प्रधानमंत्री और राष्ट्रपति अगर आपस में मिलकर एक दिमाग मन क्रिएट करते हैं, तो मुझे लगता है कि उससे ब्यूरोक्रेसी में भी एक संदेश जाता है कि हमें किस तरीके से काम करना है। और प्राइम मिनिस्टर शायद इसी तरीके का एक्सपेरिमेंट कर रहे हैं। आप देखिए सड़कों पे जो कारवां ये चल रहा है बेंजामिन नेतन्याहू और प्राइम मिनिस्टर नरेंद्र मोदी का, इस कार्रवाई को देखकर इजराइल का कौन सा आदमी नहीं अभिभूत हो जाएगा, और भारत का कौन सा आदमी नहीं समझेगा कि इजराइल का प्रधानमंत्री हमारा मित्र है, हमारे प्रधानमंत्री का मित्र है, और इसलिए हमारा भी मित्र है, और हम दोनों मिल के आगे आने वाले दिनों में चाहे कृषि का क्षेत्र हो या सिंचाई का क्षेत्र हो या तकनीक का क्षेत्र हो। और इनोवेशन तो अभी हमारा देश समझने की कोशिश कर रहा है। स्टार्टअप हम समझने की कोशिश करें कि है क्या चीज़, क्या इससे करना है। और इस तरह से हम बार बार जब स्टार्टअप इनोवेशन की बात बोल रहे हैं तो निश्चित तौर पे हमारे जो नौजवान हैं उनके मन में एक सपना कुलबुला रहा होगा कि हम भी इनोवेट करेंगे, कुछ हम भी कुछ ऐसा स्टार्ट करेंगे जिसमें कि सरकार भी हमको कुछ मदद देगी, बाहर के देश भी हमको कुछ मदद देंगे और हम और आगे बढ़ जाएंगे। तो इस तरह की भावना बढ़ेगी।
As in the scope is widening. The scope is widening. Like earlier it was just the American dream, or it was perhaps going to the UK or some countries in Europe, or for the matter Canada. But you know, this through the years now we are seeing that the scope is widening, that the investments are widening. The youth can actually look ahead for a future in several other countries which otherwise were quite unreachable to a certain extent. And the motorcade, of course, now has paused there for a while. Do we see them, Akhilesh, getting down from the cars and greeting the people? Is तरह का कुछ देखा जाएगा? Will we see something like that?
I think Prime Minister
maybe they'll start waving from the windows. Is that something we'll be seeing?
हमें हमेशा प्रधानमंत्री ऐसा करते हैं कि वो कनेक्ट करने के लिए कोशिश करते हैं। वो कभी नमस्कार करते हैं, कभी हाथ हिलाते हैं और इस तरह से जो अगल बगल की जनता है और फिर जो जनता टीवी देख रही है वो भी एक संप्रेषण का एक तरीका होता है। तो प्रधानमंत्री हमेशा इस तरह के संकेतों का, बॉडी लैंग्वेज का उपयोग करते हैं ताकि जो जनता है वो कनेक्ट कर ले कि हाँ प्रधानमंत्री जा रहे हैं, प्रधानमंत्री हमें विश कर रहे हैं। और जब ज्वाइंट एक तरीके की एक रैली या रोड शो, आप जो भी कहें, इस तरह का हो रहा है, इसमें प्रधानमंत्री एक बार ये संदेश दे रहे हैं कि हमने इजराइल के अपने दोस्त को बुलाया है अपने यहाँ। मैं भी सम्मान दे रहा हूँ, आप भी सम्मान दो, आप भी इजराइल को प्रेम दो, हम भी प्रेम दे रहे हैं। तो यह एक जो भावना बनती है और एक देश का जनमानस बदलता है। ट्रेसी, एक्चुअली इसके माध्यम से प्रधानमंत्री क्या कर रहे हैं, देश के जनमानस को भी बदलने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं कि देखिए हम लोग एफिशिएंसी को प्रधानता दे रहे हैं। इजराइल ने एक तरीके की दक्षता हासिल की है विज्ञान के क्षेत्र में, तकनीक के क्षेत्र में, कृषि के क्षेत्र में। और कृषि इतना भावनात्मक पहलू है हमारे पूरे देश का। 70% जनता कृषि से जुड़ी ही है और कृषि के बारे में जब भी हम कुछ बोलते हैं तो लोग सुनने लगते हैं कि अच्छा कृषि के बारे में होना क्या है। आमतौर पर एक निराशा का ही माहौल होता है, बहुत बातें कही जाती है, हो नहीं पाता। लेकिन जब लोग सुनते हैं कि बहुत कम पानी से बहुत ज़्यादा अनाज बना सकते हैं, बहुत बूंद बूंद पानी से हम सब्जियां उगा सकते हैं, जो गुजरात में अब कर रहे हैं लोग, कई जगह पर कर रहे हैं। तो इस तरह का जब किसानों के मन में ऐसी बात आती है कि अच्छा ऐसी तकनीक हमारे यहाँ आने वाली है तो लोगों में उत्सुकता आती है। एक ऐसा देश है जो ऐसे कर रहा है कि बंजर में अनाज उगा लिया, मरुभूमि में हम कहते हैं कि हरियाली ला दी। तो यह हमारा बहुत बड़ा इलाका है राजस्थान में या कहीं गुजरात में जहाँ बहुत मरुभूमि है और कई जगह बंजर ज़मीन है जो मध्य प्रदेश में भी है, उत्तर प्रदेश में भी है, बिहार में भी, हर जगह इस तरह की है। तो लोगों को उत्सुकता है और जब प्रधानमंत्री ले जा रहे हैं तो लोगों को लगता है कि हाँ कुछ महत्वपूर्ण होने वाला है।
We just saw, of course, the Prime Minister is waving at the people who have gathered there on the sides, also waving at the performers there. Harsh, you know, when we're talking about people, the people-to-people contact of sorts. Tourism, does it play a big role? We do know that Israelis come to a large extent to India, and that is something that we really haven't tapped. We just took it for granted. It's something that they come each year, and we have a certain amount of revenue that we gather from there. But that is something that we are looking at more closely, is it now?
Yes, and I think it's rather unfortunate that because there is the spiritual connect that many Israelis feel towards India. Of course you cannot put a monetary denomination on that, but there is something that we could have been more open about. That, look, this is something that is our strength, and if more Israelis want to tap into, then they are also welcome, because most of them actually do it on their own. The Indian state, for example, has not been that welcoming so far. So I think under this government certain things have changed, and in particular this idea that you need to use your soft power to attract other countries, and especially your cultural heritage, your spiritual heritage, and that I think connects us to Israelis, and these are Israelis who are young. These are below 25. So what is interesting is that you are creating stakeholders in Israel over the next several generations. So that is, I think, very important to tap into. I think also the fact that Netanyahu is tapping into this idea that, look, Israel is also very interesting travel destinations to come and visit us.
Yes.
It's not all doom and gloom.
And we're opening our arms to Bollywood.
Yes. Exactly.
Yes.
It's not all doom and gloom.
Absolutely.
You know, it's not all we live there.
Yes.
You know, we hardly, there are terror incidents here and there, but no one dies. You know, it's not like, I think, in fact, India, if you go to border areas, would find more turbulence than you find in Israel. But I think this idea that Israel is somehow so preoccupied with security, it's very dangerous. I think those are some of the issues that they have been trying to address, and so therefore this idea that more films should be made in Israel, Indian films should be made in Israel, and they want to encourage that. So at some level this becomes about how do you make ordinary Indians and ordinary Israelis stakeholders in this relationship. And I think this is a very good way of doing this. Mr. Modi has really will be attracting a lot of attention with this, and he's trying to do that. I mean, he's trying to make ordinary Indians aware of Israel. I mean, most of them, for example, in their hurly-burly of their lives, won't even recognize that yes, there is someone is there, some country is there, we have some problems, but they are important partners, but so what? You know, so I think this kind of a reception, 4-day visit, 5-day visit, where every day Mr. Modi is accompanying the Prime Minister of Israel, he's giving him his personal attention. I think it resonates with a lot of people.
वो जो एक हर्ष, वो जो अतिथि देवो भव का जो हम बात करते हैं कि अतिथि देवो भव, जो हमारे टूरिज्म इंडस्ट्री का या सरकार का जो मैसेज है उसमें बहुत ही हम प्रायोरिटी के साथ कहते हैं अतिथि देव भव, लेकिन वो जनता के बीच में कैसे जाए कि अतिथि हमारा देव है। आमतौर पर हम विदेशी आता है उसको फिरंगी मान लेते हैं कि अच्छा फिरंगी है, पता नहीं है किसका क्या जीवन है क्या नहीं है। लेकिन जब इस तरह के रोड शो करके आप दिखाते हैं कि ये फिरंगी हमारा दोस्त है, ये जो रंग का फ़र्क है लेकिन ये हमारा वैसा ही दोस्त है जैसा आप हमारे हो, तो वो एक मैसेज आता है कि फिर जनता भी अतिथि को देवता समझने लगती है। अभी तक तो ये लगता है कि सरकार अतिथि को देवता समझती है क्योंकि कुछ रेवेन्यू आएगा, लेकिन उसके समानांतर जनता में एक रिसेप्टिविटी बढ़े, उनकी जनता स्वीकार करे कि हाँ जी ये जो आगरा में ताजमहल देखने आया है वो दूसरे कलर का है लेकिन वो हमारा अतिथि है और हमको उसको सम्मान देना है, उस जो हम अपने को देते हैं उससे ज़्यादा सम्मान देना, तभी वो ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा लेंगे आएंगे। और वो जो यहाँ पर्यटन के लिए आया, यहाँ से अच्छी भावनाएं लेकर वापस जाए, तभी वो वर्ड ऑफ द माउथ ज़्यादा इंपॉर्टेंट हो जाता है। तो बेसिकली आप यही मैसेज देते हैं पूरी दुनिया में कि हम एक रिसेप्टिव कंट्री हैं, जहाँ अगर आप हमारे यहाँ हैं तो हमारा आपका स्वागत करेंगे, हम नाच गाने से स्वागत करेंगे, हम भोजन से स्वागत करेंगे और हमारे लोग भी आपका तहे दिल से स्वागत करेंगे। तो यह एक मैसेज देना सरकार की तरफ से और इस तरह के रोड शो के माध्यम से वो एक मैसेज जाता है, तो जनता भी समझती है कि हमारा जो भी आ रहा है वो हमारा अतिथि है और उसको हमको सम्मान देना है। तो दिस इज इक्वली इंपॉर्टेंट फॉर आवर tourism industry. This message goes well down bureaucracy, down to all the employees and also the people who like our reaching out to other countries कि हाँ जी ऐसे हमको करना है। तो जब प्रधानमंत्री महत्व दे रहे हैं, इतने देर तक सड़क पे घुमा रहे हैं, 6 दिन साथ घूम रहे हैं, तो हमको भी उनका महत्व देना है। और जब जाने की इजरायली है तो नेचुरली जैसे आज जापानीज़ के बारे में साथ प्रधानमंत्री ने किया, लोग जानते हैं कि जापान हमारा दोस्त है, रूस के बारे में जब जानते हैं कि रूस हमारा दोस्त है, तो उसी तरह से चीज़ें आगे बढ़ती हैं और लोग एक दूसरे को समझने लगते हैं, जनता भी समझती है। तो मुझे लगता है कि यह प्रयोग उसी दिशा में एक कदम है।
Absolutely, it's a good message. It's a positive message, not only as far as diplomacy is concerned, but also like we've been pointing out, like on a personal level as well. It's a message that goes out that anybody who comes to your country, this is the way you should receive them, this is the way you should treat them, and this is the way you should entertain them, guide them, tell them about the country, and then perhaps you will see them coming more often. And that is how relationship and stronger ties, of course, are forged and maintained and in fact strengthened as well. Some visuals, of course, of the people who've been standing there. They've been waiting for a while, clearly, with flags of India and Israel.
Israel और भारत दोनों के flag लिए हुए हैं।
Yes, that's right. In fact, I've noticed that even when the performances were going on, they've given descriptions of what is happening, not just in Hindi, but in in the Israeli language, as in Hebrew as well. So that's interesting, and it will be. I mean, that's a way of encouraging more involvement, of course, of the other side as well. This is an 8-kilometer stretch, so we'll be seeing this motorcade moving very slowly for quite some time. Our viewers who are joining us at this point of time here on Rajya Sabha TV, we're showing you these live visuals, of course, of Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu undertaking this road show on the way from the airport of Ahmedabad on the way going towards Sabarmati Ashram, where they would pay homage to Mahatma Gandhi. And then on the way, you can see, of course, people gathered there to welcome both the Prime Minister and especially Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. And it's going to be quite an interesting event, an interesting day for him. And we are talking, of course, about the symbolism, the significance of a roadshow like this, and also the symbolism of this friendship, which we are now seeing definitely, undoubtedly, as a strong one, something that has not been out in the open for many decades, isn't it, Harsh? But finally, you know, since last year, we're seeing it's a new kind of a friendship, which is, of course, based on respect for the other nations that are involved, but also on the fact that we are a mature nation and we need to deal with our own issues on our own. But it also helps, doesn't it, that the US is also encouraging of Israel, that the US is also a country which is trying to open up to Israel as well. It does help to a certain extent.
Yes, I think, you know, there are multiple layers. In that sense, what we have looked at for a long time is that Israel had a special relationship with the US. And in some ways, you know, when in those days when we looked at US with suspicion, that became a problem. Now I think when there is a greater sort of convergence in the views of Delhi and Washington, that helps in building relationships with Israel. But by and large, I think what is interesting is that this relationship has evolved at its own pace. So
yes.
That means that we are not making it contingent on other countries. And I think this goes beyond just the US. As I think many Israelis would point out, that India has very close ties with Iran, and therefore, you know, which they see as a problem. But certainly they are willing to concede the point that, look, you can have a relationship with Iran so long as it does not impinge on what we consider as our existential issues. Similarly, India can have concerns that Israel has close ties with China. So, but that does not mean that we will not engage Israel. And that does not mean you know, that we should make our relationship contingent to every time Israelis meet Chinese, we should ask questions, what has been going on, etc.
Yes.
So I think the relationship is now at a level where we can have open and frank, candid conversations about, yes, you know, there are multiple stakeholders in this relationship, and there was this issue of Palestine, for example. There is this issue of other stakeholders, and that will continue, because we are all, after all, independent sovereign nation states, which will have to look at our priorities from our own perspective. We cannot you know, we cannot concede that space to others, and that's, I think, is well understood both in Delhi and in Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, that this is something that will continue. But constructing a mature relationship, I think it is remarkable, you know, the kind of statements that Mr. Netanyahu has made after our vote in the UN. Will not, you know, you would not even hear your close friends saying about some of those things, which you consider your close friends. They would take offense if you have done the same thing to them. But Mr. Netanyahu took it in his stride. He said, yes, well, you know, how does it matter? There are bigger issues at stake.
What you're seeing, of course, are visuals of the previous roadshow that we saw of a similar level. That was, of course, with the Japanese Premier Shinzo Abe there. This was in September that we saw, and that was a one-of-a-kind roadshow that we saw there. It took quite a lot of people by surprise. How is it that we're going to see a roadshow of two such leaders? I mean, we've seen Prime Minister Modi himself on a roadshow, but it was, you know, it was unheard of to actually see a head of state at a roadshow, and he seemed to be enjoying there as well. And now we're seeing a similar kind of a roadshow also, although, of course, within closed. They are not really on an open jeep. Perhaps there are security concerns, you know, as far as the Israeli PM is concerned. But nonetheless, I mean, you know, he's there sitting with Prime Minister Narendra Modi, waving to the crowd, you know, reaching out, taking it slow, reaching there to Sabha, and that's a good message to the people.
ऐसे ही देखिए ट्रेसी कि प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी और बेंजामिन नेतन्याहू इजराइल के प्रधानमंत्री अंदर बैठे हुए हैं, और अगर वे बाहर रहते तो ऐसे हाथ हिलाते. So you can just imagine. बट आप याद कीजिए कि जब प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी प्रधानमंत्री बनने के बाद पहली बार भूटान की यात्रा पर गए थे, फर्स्ट विजिट वाज इन भूटान, एंड भूटान में मैं था उस समय वहाँ पे, और एयरपोर्ट से थिम्फू तक, राजधानी तक, ऐसा ही रोड शो वहाँ प्रधानमंत्री का भूटान के प्रधानमंत्री ने किया. दोनों साथ साथ गए, और दोनों तरफ माने लगातार जनता थी, बच्चे, महिलाएं, नौजवान, झंडे लिए हुए भारत और भूटान के. तो वो एक पहला एक्सपीरियंस था प्रधानमंत्री बनने के बाद. भूटान ने प्रधानमंत्री का जिस तरीके से स्वागत किया, तो मुझे लगता है कि प्रधानमंत्री ने वहाँ से भी कुछ क्यू लिया होगा कि कैसे प्रभावित कर सकते हो। और जैसा हर्ष अभी बता रहे थे, इट्स रियली समथिंग वेरी इंटरेस्टिंग कि इजराइल चीन के भी बहुत करीब है, तो हम कैसे उसको टैकल करेंगे। अब चीन के साथ तो पूरे दुनिया के सभी देश करीब हैं, क्योंकि चीन के साथ सबका व्यापार है, लेकिन हम कैसे, माने उसमें तो हम चुप नहीं बैठ सकते कि ठीक है चीन आपके साथ है तो मैं क्या करूं, क्योंकि हमारे पास जो है उस सबसे हमको अपना मित्र बनाना है, अपना दोस्त बनाना है उन सारी चीज़ों के साथ जो हमारे पास है। और हमारे पास जो यह एक स्वागत करने की जो परंपरा है, यह जो एक हमारी संस्कृति है जिसमें हम तरह तरह के सांस्कृतिक माध्यमों से भी आपको प्रभावित कर सकते हैं, आपको अपने दिल के करीब ला सकते हैं। तो यह जो हमारा विपन है, इस विपन के सामने कई बार दुनिया के बहुत सारे बड़े बड़े बैलिस्टिक मिसाइल भी फेल कर जाते हैं। जब आप प्यार का संबंध दिखाते हो, आप किसी ऐसे देश को जिसकी संस्कृति के बारे में उन्हें हमारी संस्कृति के बारे में नहीं पता था, और जब वे नज़दीक से देखते हैं कि आपके अंदर, हमारे अंदर, और जनता भी अपना अमूल्य समय निकाल कर अगर घंटों को सड़क के सामने खड़ी रहती है, तो आप किसी भी बड़े देश से, अमेरिका से, इंग्लैंड से, फ्रांस से, इवन इजराइल से भी इतनी उम्मीद नहीं कर सकते। हर आदमी वहाँ बहुत बिजी है, लेकिन हमारे यहाँ एक प्रेम की भावना होती है, इसके चलते एक रैलियाँ होती हैं, लोग आते हैं और आपका स्वागत करते हैं। तो यह एक ऐसा विपन बनता है, एक ऐसा स्ट्रेटेजिक टूल बनता है जो हमको आर्थिक संबंधों में और ज़्यादा उसमें प्रगाढ़ता पैदा करता है, जो हम मन का संबंध बनाते हैं। और यही मन का संबंध भारत में आकर जब बनता है, तो चाहे वो जापान से हमारा व्यापार जितना आगे बढ़ रहा हो, जिस पेस में आगे बढ़े, इजराइल से जिस पेस में आगे बढ़े, दुनिया के अन्य देशों से, वो तो हमारा और उनका रिक्वायरमेंट मर्ज करेगा तभी आगे बढ़ेगा। लेकिन यह जो एक अस्थाई भाव एक पैदा होता है देश के नेताओं के बीच में और दोनों देशों की जनता, यह एक बड़ा महत्वपूर्ण साबित होता है। और जैसा कि देखें कि रूस के साथ अभी भी हमारे दिल के संबंध बने हुए हैं। हमारे बीच में व्यापार में भले ही उतार चढ़ाव आता रहता हो, लेकिन एक बार जब दिल का संबंध बनता है तो बना रहता है। हम ना रूस हम पे अविश्वास कर सकता है, ना हम उस पर अविश्वास कर सकते हैं। अगर रूस की सड़कों पर आए और लोग देखें कि इंडियन है तो गाड़ी रोक देते हैं, वेव करते हैं। तो इस तरह के संबंध बनेंगे। जिस तरह का एक्सपेरिमेंट प्रधानमंत्री कर रहे हैं, तो कई देशों की जनता के साथ हमारे ऐसे संबंध बनेंगे। और इजराइल को, जिसको हम इतना महत्व, स्वागत और सम्मान दे रहे हैं, सांस्कृतिक रूप से अपने को परिचित करा रहे हैं उनसे, तो निश्चित तौर पे इजराइल के लोग भी इससे काफ़ी अभिभूत हो रहे होंगे, जो देख रहे होंगे इस तरह के रोड शो को और इस तरह के संचालन को, डिप्लोमेसी के इस अभिनव प्रयोग को। मैं कहूँगा कि डिप्लोमेसी का एक अभिनव प्रयोग है जिसे प्रधानमंत्री संचालित कर रहे हैं। और
एब्सोल्युटली। और जो डेलीगेशन आई है हर्ष, इट्स अ बिग डेलीगेशन दैट ही इज कम विद नेतन्याहू, and that in itself talks a lot about its willingness to open up on various fronts. We did talk about the different kinds of MOUs and the agreements that were inked between both sides, and on various levels, not just on the very staid, to a certain extent, defense, which has been the pillar really of the relationship so far. And that says a lot about the kind of people who have also come from there accompanying Netanyahu.
Yes, I think it's extraordinary that you have almost 130 corporate representatives with him. Such a big delegation from Israel for the first time in
over
India.
100 companies.
Yes, and I think that's remarkable, given that given that the Indo-Israeli economic relations have not been where they could potentially be. But I think that's also a reflection of that we want to build that. So certainly you want to have as many stakeholders in that as possible, and I think that's a big delegation visit will certainly help in galvanizing. I think the CEO meeting that both the Prime Ministers addressed was very critical in that regard. But I think also the sentiment that perhaps Mr. Netanyahu also mentioned, that look, ultimately we both rely on free markets. We are both relying on how do you channel how do you curtail bureaucracy and channel the free spirits of the economy, and that is something that again which brings us together, and that is I think an affirmation of Mr. Modi's style of working that he commented upon, that look, ease of doing business sentiment has been changed, and this idea that bureaucracy needs to be cut has been almost internalized. And
it has been said several times by Netanyahu himself.
Yes, and I think that's again a signal to his corporate sector that look, India is an investment destination which is just out there. Just kick the door open. There are ways there. Invest in India. So I think very important signaling is happening at multiple levels. And with this, I think the engagement broadening up also helps in that regard. So if you have this kind of an approach where you can see that we are relatively at ease with each other at the broader societal level, then that makes it easier for corporate sector to look at India as an investment destination, because that means that culturally also there is much that binds the two countries together, and that is always an important aspect. We trade more with America, with Britain, partly because we have a certain cultural understanding. So I think Israelis, given what we have, there is no reason why we cannot produce the kind of interactions, especially in the economic and trade side that we have, which is something that is a priority area now, given that we have seen a relative stagnation in that.
Yes.
लेकिन हर्ष, क्या आपको लग रहा है कि प्रधानमंत्री नेतन्याहू खास तौर पे बार बार ये ब्यूरोक्रेसी के बारे में बोल रहे हैं कि ब्यूरोक्रेसी, एक प्रधानमंत्री भी एक तरीके से कहें कि उसको एक्सेप्ट कर रहे हैं और बार बार बता रहे हैं कि हमने ये मेजर्स लिए हैं कि इन मेजर्स के द्वारा हम इन्वेस्टमेंट को बढ़ा सकते हैं, लेकिन कहीं ना कहीं से एक एक्सेप्टेंस का एक लेवल है कि ब्यूरोक्रेसी एक प्रॉब्लम क्रिएट कर रहा है। तो आपको क्या लगता है, ब्यूरोक्रेसी क्या प्रॉब्लम क्रिएट कर रहा है, और कर रहा है तो क्यों कर रहा है?
नहीं, ब्यूरोक्रेसी हमेशा जिस तरह से ऑपरेट करती है उसमें अगर उसकी मल्टीपल लेयर्स हो, अगर क्लैरिटी ना हो, तो उसमें ब्यूरोक्रेसी को काफ़ी अथॉरिटी मिल जाती है। तो कहीं पर वो जो अथॉरिटी है टू डिसाइड कि आपको ये लाइसेंस देना है नहीं देना है, आपको ये इन्वेस्टमेंट अपॉर्चुनिटी मुझे सैंक्शन करनी है कि नहीं करनी है, वहाँ पर मुझे लगता है अभी भी भारत काफ़ी और देशों से जहाँ पर सिंगल विंडो क्लियरेंस मिल जाता है आपको, वहाँ काफ़ी पीछे है। तो उसमें जितनी विंडोज़ होंगी उतने ब्यूरोक्रेट्स होंगे, और जितने ब्यूरोक्रेट्स होंगे आपको उतनी बार उनको सेटिस्फाई करना पड़ेगा।
लेकिन हर्ष, ये बहुत ही 30 साल से करीब करीब हो गए हम नई आर्थिक सुधार हो गए, और नई आर्थिक सुधार का मंत्र पूरी तरह से ऊपर से नीचे तक गया है, राइट डाउन, कि हमको सुधार करना है, हमको इन्वेस्टमेंट लाना है। यह भी एक्सेप्टेड हो गया है अक्रॉस ऑल पार्टीज। लेफ्ट के लोगों को कहीं कहीं रिजर्वेशंस होता है, लेकिन उन्होंने भी कई मामलों में एक्सेप्ट कर लिया है, सिंगल ब्रांड में कर रहा है, ऐसे कुछ कंडीशंस के साथ। तो ऐसे में ब्यूरोक्रेसी के अंदर क्या ऐसा भय है जो ब्यूरोक्रेसी डिले करती है, जिसके कारण सिर्फ इजराइल नहीं बल्कि जापानीज भी कहेंगे, अमेरिकन भी कहेंगे, सारे देशों के नेता या उनसे डिप्लोमेट से बात कीजिए तो ब्यूरोक्रेसी आपका परेशान, ब्यूरोक्रेसी के अंदर
नहीं, ब्यूरोक्रेसी की मुझे लगता है उसकी परेशानी नहीं, उसको अगर आप एक एज अ पॉलिटिकल एक्टर देखेंगे तो उसमें ये होगा कि ब्यूरोक्रेसी अपनी पावर पोजीशन को प्रिजर्व करना चाहती है, हर एक्टर करना चाहता है। तो उसमें ब्यूरोक्रेसी को अगर उसका राइट ले लेंगे उससे, तो वो पुशबैक तो करेगा। तो वहाँ पर क्योंकि अगर वो राइट कंप्लीटली उनसे चला जाता है तो उनकी अथॉरिटी कितनी कम हो जाती है। तो वहाँ पर मुझे लगता है आपको वो मल्टीपल ब्यूरोक्रेट्स का रोल तो रहेगा, लेकिन वो कैसे ऑपरेशनलाइज आपको करना है, ये आपको डिसाइड करना है। तो पिछले जैसे आपने जिक्र किया कि जब से उदारीकरण हो रहा है तब से ब्यूरोक्रेसी का रोल कम होता जा रहा है, लेकिन वो अभी भी इतना परवेसिव है कि अभी भी आपको इस तरह के कमेंट्स मिलते हैं, इस तरह के सजेशंस आते हैं। अभी भी आपके जो सबसे क्लोज एंड डियर फ्रेंड्स हैं वो ये कहेंगे कि ब्यूरोक्रेसी इज अ मेजर प्रॉब्लम, वी कैन नॉट डू बिजनेस विद इंडिया अनलेस ब्यूरोक्रेटिक हर्डल्स आर रिजॉल्व्ड। So this is incredible that we have not been able to do that. Everywhere bureaucracy is a problem, but in India, because we have a 60-year-old tradition of bureaucracy, perhaps that makes it multiple.
तो क्या लगता है कि इसके माध्यम से प्रधानमंत्री या बेंजामिन नेतन्याहू भी एक तरीके से संदेश दे रहे हैं दोनों देशों की ब्यूरोक्रेसी को कि नाउ यू हैव टू कम टू द टर्म्स ऑफ रियलिटी दैट वी वांट टू इन्वेस्ट, क्रॉस इन्वेस्ट, and you have to come to this that we have to invest, you have to make situation easy rather than complicating it. क्या ये संदेश दे रहा है?
I think जो जिस तरह से नेतन्याहू ने कल कमेंट किया था ब्यूरोक्रेसी के ऊपर, और उससे पहले भी किया था,
हाँ 2 बार इनफैक्ट,
उसमें CII फिकी के जो उसमें भी किया था जी।
तो मुझे लगता है वो जब दोनों प्रधानमंत्रियों के बीच में जो डिस्कशन हुआ होगा उसमें बड़ा मुद्दा उभर के आया होगा,
और इसका मतलब एक्सेप्टेड ये है दोनों प्रधानमंत्री के बीच में कि हमको अपने ब्यूरोक्रेसी को कहना है कि भाई साहब आप।
I think he says it again is also a message that he is giving out to his own people. That here is a leader of a country who accepts that this is a weakness in the system, but he is willing to work it out. He is willing to make it now a tool that is actually going to help you. Because if you get the message that comes out from Prime Minister Modi himself, he accepts that there are certain chinks in the system, but he does want to empower you to make sure that you do your work properly, but we give you the correct tools to make it work properly.
And
I think that
is a message
important.
that Mr. Modi himself has given to the bureaucrats, that look, we have to achieve certain things and don't become an obstacle.
Yes.
So I think now that is often reiterated by his contemporaries or his counterparts, makes it even more important, and I think it also underlines the resolve of the government that look, despite the challenges that we face, we are on track to achieve the sort of developments.
आप याद होगा, आप PIO कॉन्फ्रेंस जो हुआ, पार्लियामेंटेरियन ऑफ इंडियन ओरिजिन, उसमें प्रधानमंत्री ने एक बात जो खास तौर पे कही, वो माइंडसेट चेंज की बात कही उन्होंने, कि इंडिया के अंदर एक माइंडसेट चेंज है, और ब्यूरोक्रेसी का तो एक इम्पोर्टेंस है कि ब्यूरोक्रेसी इज द टूल दैट कीप्स द कंट्री टुगेदर। ब्यूरोक्रेसी के इस कंट्रीब्यूशन को आप नकार ही नहीं सकते हैं, जो कि हमारा एक विकसित देश था, सामंती संस्कृति से निकला हुआ, समाज से निकला हुआ देश था, उसको एकजुट करने में ब्यूरोक्रेसी की भूमिका रही है। फूड सिक्योरिटी का नेटवर्क बनाया ब्यूरोक्रेसी ने बनाया, लेकिन कुछ गड़बड़ियां हैं, कुछ पावर प्ले है, उसके अलावा कुछ डर भी है ब्यूरोक्रेसी के अंदर कि अगर ये कर देंगे तो पता नहीं क्या हो जाए। तो ये सब चीज़ों को दूर करने के लिए आई थिंक प्राइम मिनिस्टर इज परसुएडिंग कंसिस्टेंटली कि ब्यूरोक्रेसी के अंदर के लोगों को इस बात को समझना चाहिए कि गवर्नमेंट की प्रायोरिटी देश की प्रायोरिटी है, और हम देश की प्रायोरिटी के हिसाब से, लोगों की नीड के हिसाब से सुधार किया है। और इसके लिए ब्यूरोक्रेसी को भी ऑन बोर्ड आना चाहिए, ताकि जो हमारे कॉर्पोरेशंस हैं, इन्वेस्टमेंट के कॉर्पोरेशन से चीजों को आसान बनाने के लिए, इंटरप्राइज डेवलप करने के लिए।
I'll just have to cut you there because I had to tell our viewers that they have reached, it seems like they have reached Sabarmati Ashram, so that 8-kilometer stretch, they've completed it. They've been able to, in a way, interact in whatever form they can with the people who've been waiting around there, of course, through that entire stretch. They've been waving throughout, is at least what we saw in all the visuals. And they have reached Sabarmati Ashram, where they will pay homage to Mahatma Gandhi. And soon after this event, which will take place here, this engagement here, in fact, this program that will take place here, the leaders will in fact be inaugurating the newly built I Create Center that we'll be seeing at Dio Dholera village. And of course, it will be dedicated to the nation. So that roadshow that we were looking forward to has finally culminated at the Sabarmati Ashram. You're seeing both the prime ministers there, of course, emerging out of the vehicle, and they would be heading into Sabarmati Ashram right now.
ये उनके लिए बहुत ही अजीब बात है, फूलों का माला पहनाना और ये सब करना, ये जो धागों का माला पहनाना, ये उनके लिए एक कौतूहल का विषय भी होता है, बट दे रियली गेट इम्प्रेस्ड विथ सच टाइप ऑफ ट्रेडिशनल वेलकम। जब आप करते हैं किसी का, तो सच में उनको एक अलग तरीके की फीलिंग होती है।
Well, this, as we've been stressing upon, this visit has been definitely important for both countries in terms of trade, strategy, in terms of diplomacy, but to a large extent it has been really about the bonhomie. It's about the friendship between both the countries, and it's about cementing what is going to be an important friendship in the years to come. जब तक Alright, so what you're seeing now on the screens are live visuals of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu along with his wife Sarah Netanyahu, and being accompanied, welcomed in fact, by Prime Minister Narendra Modi at Sabarmati Ashram in Ahmedabad. About half an hour back is when the Israeli Prime Minister landed in Ahmedabad, and along with Prime Minister Modi, as you see there in the visuals, they met some artists there at the airport, and very quickly they embarked upon this road show which took place where they waved at the people who were on the roads there waiting to welcome the Israeli Prime Minister and his wife, and the delegation, of course, who accompanied the Israeli Prime Minister. And finally they reached Sabarmati Ashram, where they paid homage to Mahatma Gandhi, now taking a tour really of Sabarmati Ashram, and some interesting visuals there you were seeing, of course. We've got Akhilesh Suman in studio with me here, who's been taking us through the significance of this visit, giving us a broader view, a perspective of the India-Israel relationship. And at the moment, of course, we both seem, as our viewers would be, mesmerized by what we are looking here in the visuals, Akhilesh.
Yeah.
You know, the charkha is obviously a very important part of not just Sabarmati Ashram, but, you know, just the identity of India.
Yeah,
and you can
really.
see, of course, Prime Minister Modi is explaining what all, you know, is there. The importance of the ashram, the layout there, of course.
Yeah, that's why I was telling you earlier that Prime Minister welcomes his friend as he is the dearest friend of his time and of his life. And this is the your personality of a big man, that when you are with someone, you should make him feel that he is the best one for you.
Important person, yes.
Most important person for him till the time he is there. So Prime Minister is not acting just as a friend, he is also acting as a guide. He is telling him what is this, what is the significance, and you have to keep the guest engaged so that, and the name, you know, that Mahatma Gandhi is our national icon. हमारे राष्ट्रीय प्रतीक है महात्मा गांधी, और चरखा हमारी राष्ट्रीय जो स्वतंत्रता है, राष्ट्रीय जो आत्मनिर्भरता है, खास करके कहें कि हम वी आर सेल्फ डिपेंडेंट. इफ यू डोंट नीड योर मील्स, रादर आई कैन यूज माई चरखा टू मेक क्लोथ फॉर मी. जो ब्रिटिश के खिलाफ जो एक सिंबल बना कि चरखा के माध्यम से हम ब्रिटेन को जीतेंगे, तो इसका परिचय बहुत देशों में ऐसे सिंबल नहीं होते हैं, ट्रेसी. ये भारत की एक खासियत है कि हमारे पास महात्मा गांधी जैसे एक आइकॉन है और चरखा जैसा एक सिंबल है, जिसके माध्यम से हम दुनिया को बताते हैं कि हम विपन्नता में रहेंगे. हम अगर हमारे पास उतना तकनीकी विकास नहीं है, फिर भी हमारे पास वो ताकत है जिसके माध्यम से हम आपके साथ मुकाबला कर सकते हैं. तो यह जो एक सेंस ऑफ एक जो प्राइड होता है देश, किसी भी देश के अंदर, वो सेंस ऑफ प्राइड प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी बेंजामिन नेतन्याहू को दे रहे हैं. और ख़ास करके इजराइल के संदर्भ में अगर देखें तो आप मान सकते हैं कि इजराइल ने भी इसी तरह से आत्मनिर्भर होकर काम किया है। आप समझिए कि विश्व युद्ध के बाद अपनी जगह से अपने अपने देशों से निकालने को मजबूर किया जाना, उसके बाद एक एलियन लैंड में आके बसाती है पूरी दुनिया उनको, और उसके बाद एलियन लैंड में आके बसते हैं और मरुभूमि में अपनी ज़मीन बनाते हैं, खेती करते हैं। तो यह आत्मनिर्भरता का प्रतीक है और इजरायलियों को इसका बहुत गर्व है, वो इसका बहुत आत्मसम्मान है कि हमने एक कहें कि बालू से घी बनाया, बालू पे पौधा खड़ा किया, बालू पे घास बना लिए।
That self-sustenance is something that Israel is known for. They've really built themselves up from nothing to a certain extent. And they've reached heights which is quite enviable. And that is something which India is recognizing.
See, the Prime Minister, as he was talking, you can tell that it is mesmerizing. That two head of a state.
And there's no sense of awkwardness.
Sitting just on a bench in the forecourt with his wife, and then he is talking. They are talking so informally. So it is a messaging, but it is not just messaging.
Yes.
It is also, I think, feeling of bonhomie that you feel.
A genuine friendship.
Genuine feeling that yes, it is a small country. You can get all those technology for many places.
Yes.
But you get a friend, you get a friend. And a friendship is forever, for a long time, and unless there is a bigger collision of interest, friendship remains.
Yes.
So you keep the memories. Benjamin Netanyahu came here, Sabha Ashram, he will know that what Mahatma Gandhi's phenomenon was all about. And मैं आपको ट्रेसी याद दिलाऊंगा कि आइंस्टीन जो यहूदी परिवार में जन्म लिया था आइंस्टीन ने, और आइंस्टीन ने जो इतने बड़े वैज्ञानिक थे, आइंस्टीन ने महात्मा गांधी को कहा था के बारे में कि शताब्दियों बाद जनता को इस बात का विश्वास करना मुश्किल होगा कि एक ऐसा हाड़ मांस का आदमी सड़क पे चलता था और लाठी लेके चलता था, जिसने कि एक पूरे दुनिया के इतिहास को बदल दिया। कॉलोनिज्म को इतना कमज़ोर हो गया उसके बाद कि एक के बाद एक सारे कॉलोनी धराशायी होते चले गए। तो आइंस्टीन का ये कहना था, और आइंस्टीन जिस लीनिएज से, जिस फैमिली से आते हैं, उसी फैमिली, उसी तरीके के समुदाय से बेंजामिन नेतन्याहू हैं। और उन्होंने महात्मा गांधी को आके जब समझा, देखा, तो वो उनके अंदर एक बन रही होगी भावना कि आइंस्टीन ने जो कहा था बिल्कुल सही कहा था। कि एक वैज्ञानिक, एक राजनीतिक चिंतक, राजनीतिक नेता, सामाजिक सुधारक, महात्मा गांधी सब कुछ थे। उनके कह रहा था कि एक लोगों को कौतूहल होगा, विश्वास भी नहीं होगा कि ऐसा आदमी था जो धोती पहन के घूमता था और एक लाठी लेके अंग्रेजों को भगा दिया। तो यह एक हमारे इतिहास की एक अद्भुत विरासत है। इस विरासत के बारे में दुनिया के बहुत देशों को समझना बहुत मुश्किल होता है कि क्यों भारत इतनी विविधताओं के बावजूद भारत इतना आगे बढ़ रहा है, लोकतंत्र लगातार बन रहा है, मजबूत होता जा रहा है। और दुनिया के लोग जब लोकतंत्र के बारे में, लोकतंत्र की स्थिरता के बारे में सोचते हैं तो भारत की तरफ देखते हैं कि कैसे भारत अपने प्रॉब्लम्स को सॉल्व करता है, कैसे भारत आतंकवाद को, रेडिकलाइजेशन को, सामाजिक टकरावों को, जातीय समस्याओं को, मामलों को, ईगो क्लैशेज अमंग डिफरेंट कम्युनिटीज़, इसको कैसे टैकल करता है, लोग देखते हैं। और इसलिए बेंजामिन नेतन्याहू भी जब यहाँ से जाएंगे तो मुझे भरोसा है कि उनके अंदर भी एक नई दृष्टि आएगी, क्योंकि एक मोनोलिथिक एक कम्युनिटी के बारे में सोचना और एक ऐसी टेरिटरी से घिरा रहना जहाँ की आपको हर समय भय हो कि हमारा दुश्मन हमें नष्ट करने की कोशिश कर रहा है, और ऐसे माहौल से, एक ऐसे भारत जैसे माहौल में आना, खुलेआम रोड पे घूमना और नृत्य देखना, लोगों के सामने हाथ जोड़ना, वेव करना, प्रधानमंत्री आपके साथ है, इस तरह के बगल में साबरमती नदी है जो एक भारत की एक, वह भी एक बैंकिंग का एक अद्भुत उदाहरण है। साबरमती नदी जो भारत में बैंक नदी के बांधने की जो योजना बनी, उसका एक उदाहरण साबरमती नदी है जो।
And you know, as far as friendships are concerned, we know that Prime Minister Modi is very large-hearted when it comes to, you know, receiving his friends. When it comes to, we saw that, of course, with other leaders as well when they have visited India.
Right.
Of course, we did see that roadshow that took place with Shinzo Abe, the Japanese Prime Minister, last year. But even when he received, even for that matter, Xi Jinping, you know, even that kind of reception.
I was going to tell you that.
Yes, actually, that was a very unusual reception, and we saw, you know, it did take the other, you know, dispensation, the other leaders by surprise. You know, that this is the kind of reception you get.
We welcome my friend with open arms and open heart.
But you know what I was going to say is, we know that Prime Minister Modi is that way, but the receiving of that warmth has also been equal on the part of Netanyahu as well.
Yes,
he's
really.
equally open, he's equally friendly,
Yes.
he's equally warm. And I think that is what makes this visit so special. Like, you've noticed that very few things, little things. He's going, meeting this little artist right now. He did namaste to the kids who are singing there, sitting there. Little gestures like this, of course, make a difference, and it also helps seal that friendship even more.
Yeah, right, Tracy. When you are going to a friend's house, you have to believe that my friend has a strength, that he can cure me, he can give me hygienic food, he can give me good place to stay. But if it doesn't happen, like Xi Jinping came, he was openly welcomed by our country, by Prime Minister Narendra Modi. He was here, and you don't know that what happened. Like, submarine is landing in Sri Lanka, and it destroyed the whole bonhomie that was created at that point of time. So, but unlike this, when Shinzo Abe came here, he came here with full confidence on India, that I am going to India, my friend's country, my friend's house, and I am full secure there. Benjamin Netanyahu has come to India. He believes that country will.
They are flying a kite now.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're trying to fly a kite now, and one of the few things that, of course, they're going.
पतंगबाजी का मौसम है. आपको याद होगा कि 14 जनवरी को जब कई पोंगल, संक्रांति सारे होते हैं, तो पतंग उड़ाई जाती है हमारे यहाँ. और ये पतंग उड़ाने के मौसम में बेंजामिन नेतन्याहू आए हैं, तो प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी जैसा अतिथि उनको इस फ्लेवर से नहीं छोड़ सकता था.
He's doing it quite well. He's maintaining that height of the kite as well.
Yeah, that's why. So every country there is an importance of sports, and when sports involves your mind, body, and hand, everything, it's like a war of nerves with the string and some paper-made kite. So they're enjoying. See, the wife of Benjamin Netanyahu, Sarah, is also enjoying this thing. And
let's just tell our viewers, we are watching the live visuals of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, his wife Sarah, and Prime Minister Modi there at Sabarmati Ashram. They've paid homage to Mahatma Gandhi at Sabarmati Ashram, and now they're flying a kite. And it's been an interesting hour or so since he's landed in Ahmedabad, and Prime Minister Modi has taken it upon himself to act as a guide, in fact, and give Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu all details of Ahmedabad. Everywhere they're traveling, he's constantly giving them updates on what is it about, what is the ashram about, and they've been they're at the ashram now for about 15-20 minutes or so, and they're going to sit there for a while. Let me also tell you that our assistant editor Akhilesh Suman continues to be with us in studio, and we are also joined by Shubhamoy Bhattacharya, consulting editor with the Business Standard, now with us. Shubhamoy, thanks so much for joining us this afternoon. It's been an interesting hour or more for us here. We've been tracking all these developments, and we were talking about significance of road shows when it comes to at least our political leaders, and it's all been big and magnanimous when it comes to politics in India, at least. But it's different when you see it on a diplomatic level, and that is something which we are seeing our Prime Minister indulge in time and again. He did it, of course, with Shinzo Abe, now with the Israeli Prime Minister, and it seems to have generated the kind of excitement that he had hoped, at least among the people too.
Yeah, actually, I mean, these are not like random events.
Yes.
Like, there's a method on which these reasons why many of these engagements are taken out of the South Bloc, so to say. India wasn't pretty much on those lines, but you'd see quite a few of the places abroad, like let's take the US example. Like it's quite a done thing that visiting dignitaries are taken to Camp David or Martha's Vineyard. The reason for that is that there are plenty of issues you want to discuss, and you often want it not to be a formal structured dialogue. Yes. Especially sometimes when some of the key issues are to be sorted out. These sort of, sort of what you might call setting aside or taking out for a sort of a timeout,
yes,
as you might say, helps. And with Mr. Modi, it's in fact, you would see he did that with Xi Jinping,
yes,
when they took a walk along the Sabarmati front. Shinzo Abe, as you said. So it's become a standard rigor. So, but it's not. But as I said, that the reason why these things are done, with particularly you'd see heads of state who are significant in India's positioning. These people are taken for these sort of stuff. It wasn't, as I said, it wasn't all that frequent when we were till a few years ago, but it's become quite frequent now. And one would expect that the reason why these things happen is that critical areas where countries want to talk with each other, when heads of state want to talk about each other, where they really want to settle a particular issue, these provide the settings.
Yes.
So that's why you know, all the kites and the colors and the it provides a relaxed environment where you could discuss issues, and it also kind of removes the awkwardness that you would have, you know, as heads of states, as leaders of particular countries, and perhaps it breaks the ice to a certain extent. Yeah.
Do you agree?
Exactly.
And in this particular visit, we are seeing that the friendship seems to be growing every day. I mean, this has been more or less a friendly visit, you could call it, rather than, you know, even despite the fact that there's been a huge delegation that is accompanying Netanyahu, and there is a lot of focus on various areas apart from just defense, as it has been mostly through all these years.
Told a very important thing that if you get a stretch of 5 days, he is here in 6 days. For 6 days, so one day you can say that it's in travel, coming and departure. In 5 days, if you get 5 days time, you have so many issues to also talk to. Sometimes in a structured dialogue, it is hour, so hour, 2 hour, 3 hour, like that. We do have a tradition of one-to-one talk, but there are many formal pointed things. But suppose you have to talk to issues like China. Suppose you have to talk to issues like Palestine. In formal setting, it becomes very difficult. बताइए आप पैलेस्टाइन पे चाहते क्या हैं नेतन्याहू साहब, बताइए हम क्या आपकी मदद कर सकते. You cannot talk in the delegation level talk. But if you, in this type of setting, you can tell that अच्छा करेंगे कैसे आप फिलिस्तीन को करेंगे, क्या मैं मदद कर सकता हूँ. You can talk like this when it is in this type of environment, movement. Suppose you are taking lunch somewhere and बोलेंगे अच्छा चलिए थोड़ा सा बात कर लेते हैं कि ऐसे रेडिकलिज्म को कैसे टैकल आप कर रहे हैं, हम इसमें क्या कर सकते हैं, how can we share ideas. So it seems
yeah, you're right. And क्या होता है कि in for all of these things, the one major issue that is there is discussions, as you said, without the aids. And often the reason for that is that there are so many stakes involved that it's not very comfortable when in these sort of things. Remember, India wasn't particularly a geopolitical player.
Yes.
Netanyahu, once he's come, every time in a statement to his the media team that has been accompanying him, he's been using the word world power. Now, while that may be hyperbole, but the point is that India is definitely a strong regional power. The Asian continent, there is a supremacy tussle that is going along. In these sort of circumstances, what people or other countries which significant stakes say to each other and how they position themselves will not be settled by boardroom structure discussion. They would be coming along to have very, very specific focus in areas. So you can be quite sure that beneath all the bonhomie that's going along, there is a well laid out agenda, and there are some critical areas which they obviously want to flag. And those would be what they would be looking out for in this sort of, you know, taking a day off where, as you said, one can relax and one can sit down. But the points are very clear.
The focus of your relationship, the focus on business will not wane. I mean, that is obviously going to be there. But it's interesting that it happens in this manner, and it's interesting. We were talking even earlier that this also, it's a signaling to perhaps the people as well that, you know, this is how we are going to welcome you. If we welcome your Prime Minister in this manner, we'll welcome Israelis in this manner on all fronts.
Exactly. I mean, as you note that 6 months earlier when the Indian Prime Minister went to Israel, they, in fact, the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu took 3 days off, and they were there at the sea coast. And so much so that even the First Lady of Israel, she wasn't there. So they just spent 3 days, like really talking to each other, setting certain terms of engagement. And that is, you know, there's a particular, again, as I said, that these schedules are very packed. So it's not for nothing that they would just be taking off time like that. So here when he's doing it, first of all, yes, he's reciprocating. He's giving him the same sort of feel and look outside the South Bloc,
yes,
which is very important. But along with that, there would be those issues which would be figuring in the India-Israel dialogue, which would, I'm sure, be significantly taken forward in terms of, you know, because both of them, for instance, next year face re-elections. So there are issues there. They would be discussing, I mean, the issues that they would be discussing, obviously we will not be privy to it.
yes,
But what are the thrust areas which they think needs to be done without the help of the aids is what will be talked about. I mean, some, like yesterday's their speech at the Raisina Dialogue,
yes,
sort of showed in which way the relationship is emerging and what are the key stuff that they want to look at going ahead.
Yeah, Raisina Dialogue की बात मैं बता रहा हूँ. So मैं Tracy, and he was very eloquent, Benjamin Netanyahu, and he was suggesting like a friend, and he was giving the correlation between economic power, military power, and then political power. So he was trying to tell that you have to develop your economy, you have to develop your military, and then comes for political power. And then he mentioned about how to make alliances for gaining a political power.
Yes.
So a friend advises you that yes, I'm your friend, so I am suggesting you may be taking it right way, you may be taking it wrong way, but he was using the word my friend Modi. So in this way he was trying to persuade India into an alliance of democracies. Like there has been such type of proposal many a times from even American sides. An alliance of democracy is not a bad thing, but the whole issue was that to create a situation of economy and your military in such a powerful position that other democracies also depend on you for security and leadership. So this is the whole game, that you need to be so economically sufficient so that you can attract other economies, and also militarily you have to be capable so that you can distract the negative forces present in the region and the world.
Yes.
So that is the whole suggestion, and it was, I think, a good occasion when the representatives from 90 countries were there in Raisina Dialogue yesterday, and all our bigwigs from intelligentsia to politics to strategic experts, everyone was there. So it was a messaging that I think Israel can offer you some sort of economic balancing and economic technology that will increase your economy and also in military terms. So I think every leader advocates his own interests also given an opportunity.
Yes.
So I think he might be doing in these meetings also.
Absolutely, and it's also an indication, Shubhamoy, that both the sides are now open with their relationship, and it is here to stay. It is a relationship that was based on sharing of defense to a large extent, at least on India's side. I mean, acquiring defense technology, but it's a friendship that is now developing on one which is not going to be economically viable for both sides, but also security-wise, it's something that is going to be looked at very closely. And the messaging has been from both the sides. You have radical Islamism being brought up not just from India's side, but even from Israel's side. And that's the kind of commonality that we're seeing on both fronts. And that's the messaging also that's going out as well, isn't it?
Certainly. And in fact, more than buying or selling of stuff, what these two countries would be doing is, Israel has a particular worldview, and that worldview is based on, for instance, we could say some of the issues that they are particularly uncomfortable about is the rise of Shia militarism, as they put it, across rising from, for which they think that Iran isn't their best bet. Yes. Especially Iran is now supposed to be coming closer to the flashpoints in Syria. There are reports that probably there's a larger amount of support coming from Iran now to the Shiite elements out there. Now, when that happens, Israel, for instance, is obviously very strongly allied with the US position on how the Middle East thing should be looking like. There's also the point about the shifting of the capital to Jerusalem. Now, when these sort of things happen, India, for instance, and both India, not just India, India and China, they have a different point of view about Iran. India, for instance, has invested heavily in Chabahar, and it's expected that India would be doing it even further. In fact, to checkmate Pakistan's role and to get an access to Afghanistan, India is depending on Iran and especially the Chabahar route to establish a deep line connection up to Afghanistan. So given all that, and further on into Central Asia, now these are, at one stage they would look quite different and almost like opposing positions, but that's exactly the reason why these sort of dialogues and discussions would be important, where you take away position, where you take away yourself from the
other layers,
and from the layers,
and just look at this
and just try to tell each
solely.
other.
Absolutely. We'll continue this discussion, Shubhamoy. Right at the moment, of course, we'll have to take a very quick break. We're just telling our viewers that right now the Prime Ministers, Narendra Modi and Benjamin Netanyahu, they have paid their homage at Sabarmati Ashram, and they are now heading on to a village where they would be inaugurating I Created. We'll give you more details of that in a bit. But at the moment, that's our special broadcast for the moment. We'll take a break in that. We'll be back at 1 with our midday news, and that's when we'll continue, of course, with more details on this particular visit to Gujarat and what further on would follow. And we'll be joined by our guests there as well. We'll take a quick break, be back with more. Stay with us.